In this video, we're going to be talking about what's been going on with the US dollar recently. Quite a bit of tensions are brewing for the United States with countries like Russia, China, and the Middle East. With these mounting hostilities and alliances formulating amongst these countries, many are turning away from the US dollar, and these compounding events could be gradually contributing to what is called de-dollarization. So, to get a better understanding of all of this, let's jump right in. So what is de-dollarization? Well, de-dollarization is an occurrence where other nations or entities across the world lessen their reliance on the US dollar as a primary currency or medium of exchange for trade, reserves, and international transactions. Diversifying into other currencies or commodities such as gold, or establishing alternate payment methods that don't use the US financial system are some examples. The motives for de-dollarization can vary, but they frequently have to do with worries about the US dollar strength and dominance, as well as with geopolitical unrest and economic sanctions. In an effort to expand their global influence, some nations will also promote their own national currencies as substitutes for the US dollar. One metric that can be considered as a reflection of the dollar's power is the US dollar's currency index, or DXY. The DXY is a measure of the value of the US dollar relative to a basket of other currencies. These include the euro, Swiss franc, Japanese yen, Canadian dollar, British pound, and Swedish krona, with the euro having the largest weighing of all the currencies' relative trade weights. The DXY increases when the US dollar gains strength compared to these other currencies, and investors, traders, and policymakers regard its movement as a leading indication of changes in global currency markets. Even though the DXY is a substantial currency indicator, it does not directly indicate the broader process of de-dollarization. However, the DXY in the last 6 months is down 8% and 2% year to date, signaling some loss in the dollar's strength recently. Now that we have covered some basics on what exactly de-dollarization is, let's review a timeline of the overall history of the dollar's dominance. The US dollar's dominance has been prominent for many decades, but many nations have explored reducing dependence on the US for years, even more so recently. If we look back at the 1920s, the US dollar surpassed the British pound sterling as the predominant world currency, primarily due to the political and economic turmoil brought on by World War I, which had crippled the British economy and diminished the influence on the pound. The United States, meanwhile, had come out of the war as a significant creditor nation with a robust economy, secure currency, and an influx of wartime gold. It was at the 1922 Genoa Conference where officials from numerous nations decided to adopt the dollar as the principal currency for international settlements, further solidifying the dollar's expanding importance in banking and international trade. Now let's jump to 1944. This particular year was profoundly important to the dollar's increasing dominance due to the Bretton Woods Agreement that was established at the United Nations Monetary and Financial Conference. The goal of this agreement was to forge a stable and predictable international monetary system. This was attained by defining the US dollar's exchange rate to gold at $35 per ounce and designating the dollar as the world's reserve currency. As a result, other countries had to peg their currencies to the dollar at specified exchange rates. This system was beneficial in the post-war period as it favored stimulation of economic stability and growth. Let's skip ahead over to 1960s. During this decade, European and Japanese exports became more competitive with US exports due to modernization of manufacturing in these regions. This led to production of higher quality goods and reduced cost, increasing demand for these goods over US products. Under the Bretton Woods system, the dollar was actually overvalued, and the US economy was suffering from high inflation, balance of payments deficient. This only led to US production being more expensive and less attractive in the international markets, including a drain of gold reserves. Countries like France and Britain exchanged US dollar holdings for gold, causing an abundant supply of dollars globally and difficulties with the ability to back dollars with gold. And by 1971, the Bretton Woods system was effectively terminated when President Nixon and the US government declared the end of direct convertibility of the dollars to gold, eliminating the fixed rate and allowing the dollar to fluctuate freely in relation to other currencies. The effects of this decision on the world economy included great exchange rate volatility and emergence of new international currencies currencies, financial markets, and instruments. Fast forward one decade to 1981, and inflation is in the double digits. In the 1970s, inflation soared due to many factors that included rising energy costs, high government spending, and continued balance of payments deficit. U.S. trade since the 60s was out of balance because of the U.S. had been importing more goods than exporting. The dollar also failed to maintain a stable value since the ending of the Bretton Woods system. So by 1981, after years of hyperinflation due to all of these factors, the dollar had lost 2/3 of its purchasing power. New measures did come into play during the 1980s that eventually stabilized the U.S. economy and strengthened the dollar. We're going to leap into the new millennium during the global financial crisis of 2007-2008. Most of us can remember the housing crisis during this time. Risky mortgage loans from lax lending standards were defaulted on, causing massive foreclosures and housing prices to nosedive. The entire financial system was underwater with declining economic growth and rising unemployment. This disaster spread to the entire world as financial institutions in major regions like Asia and Europe were impacted. During this period, some investors turned to the US dollar as a safe haven because of its decades-long position as the global reserve currency. Others that fear the dollar's future invested elsewhere. These fears sparked interest in reevaluating the dollar's role within the global financial system, including highlighting the need for diversified international reserves. Moving ahead to 2014, Russia annexes Crimea from Ukraine, invoking condemnation from the international community. Many countries imposed sanctions on Russia as a result, complicating Russia's economy and ability to transact internationally. This fueled Russia's prioritization of de-dollarization as the country explored use of other currencies and development of alternate financial systems and institutions in order to decrease reliance on the US dollar. So we've covered the key highlights of the dollar's history of dominance for the last century or so, but what has been going on specifically in roughly the last year? So here's some factors that have impacted the dollar since 2022 to 2023. In 2022, the ongoing COVID pandemic had profound effects on global economic and social conditions, from supply chain issues to inflation, fears over the state of the world economy, and a need to diversify foreign reserves away from the dollar caused central banks to buy gold at the fastest rate since 1967. Gold has a long history of being considered a safe haven asset during periods of economic instability, and these banks seek less exposure to the dollar as worry about the US economy heightened and has continued into this year. And while that was going on, we also had the invasion of Ukraine from Russia. So Russia's international relations have deteriorated since the invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. Putting aside political stance or beliefs, the fact that the war started caused the international community to again express disapproval for Russia's actions, just like in 2014. Therefore, the United States and other countries imposed economic sanctions on Russia and Vladimir Putin himself, further increasing Russia's diplomatic isolation. In spite of this, Russia has persisted in forging partnerships with other nations, most notably China, and has worked to deepen ties with other countries that share in hostility towards US dominance. Trade of the Russian ruble with the Chinese yuan increased 80x in 8 months during 2022, and Russia has recently decided to settle trade with Asia, Africa, and Latin America in the yuan instead of US dollars. Additionally, Russia has worked to increase its influence in areas like the Middle East and has participated in efforts to arbitrate disputes in Syria and other nations. So this brings me to Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has been taking significant steps towards lessening reliance on the US dollar and forging strong relationships with China and Russia in the last few months. The country's crown prince has stated that he is no longer interested in pleasing the United States. Saudi Arabia has entered a trade alliance with China, Russia, India, Pakistan, and 4 other countries and joined the Shanghai Cooperation Organization led by China, Russia, and other nations. China and Russia facilitated historic diplomacy deals for Saudi Arabia with Iran and Syria. In addition, Saudi Arabia, in coordination with Russia and OPEC Plus, has cut down on oil production until the end of 2023 and announced plans to accept Chinese yuan as payment for oil instead of US dollars. And for the first time in history, Saudi Arabia has welcomed a Russian military ship to dock in its country. Now let's get into movements by by BRICS and other countries. These above mentioned countries aren't the only ones wanting to cut ties with the dollar. BRICS, which includes China, Russia, also consists of Brazil, India, and South Africa, and these leading economies together are pursuing development of a new currency. Saudi Arabia and 19 other nations are interested in joining this group as well. New development bank established by BRICS will move away from the dollar by beginning to offer loans and currencies of its member countries. Russia, along with Iran, are working to launch a cryptocurrency backed by gold. Brazil and Argentina are in talks to create a common currency. Brazil and China will execute trades between each other with their own currencies instead of the dollar. And the UAE and India are exploring using the Indian ruble for non-oil trade. US dollar aversion is like a contagion. Take a look at the president of Kenya telling citizens to ditch their dollars. What does all of this mean for the US dollar really? So de-dollarization can be a source of challenges and risks to the global financial world as a whole, causing volatile currency rates and potential financial and trade system disruptions. However, despite the uprising of many countries looking to turn away from the dollar, the truth of the matter is the dollar is not very likely to lose its global sovereign status anytime soon. The manifestation of de-dollarization has happened throughout time slowly for many years, and it seems to be picking up pace in 2023. But central banks currently still retain around 60% of their foreign exchange reserves in US dollars. Therefore, the dollar will continue to remain the dominant currency amongst the global financial system, and de-dollarization will carry on obscurely and gradually. So here's my final thoughts on de-dollarization. Is this all doom and gloom? Should you sell all your assets, buy Bitcoin? Should you sell your house? Like, what should you do? The best advice I can give you is just do nothing. Do nothing and sit on it. If you look at every world reserve currency, they lasted about 100 years. Every 100 years, there is a change of guard, so to speak. Right? And when that starts to happen, or that de-dollarization starts to happen, it takes 20 to even 30 years for it to happen. So de-dollarization has been an ongoing topic for decades. And the fact that 60% of the world's reserve currency is held in US dollars tells you all you need to know. So there's nothing to FOMO into right now, nothing to worry about. I think that the best thing that you could do right now is start to consider, how do you hedge against this? Because when you factor in recession, factor in inflation, or potentially hyperinflation, you're losing buying power on your money every single day, right? So the best thing that you can do is consider how to make more dollars. How do you make more money? You can do that a few ways. You can take on a side job, but again, you're just trading time for dollars. What I would recommend is what I did 8 years ago when I got out of the Navy, is I started a side business that turned into my full-time gig, right? Start an online business, figure out a skill set where you can be valuable to a marketplace and you can charge for a product or service, right? That's why I found local lead generation. It's the thing that I've been doing for the last 8 years. So there's no better time than right now to start a business. Figure out a side hustle, figure out a side gig that you can do to generate more cash, where you can basically replace your income, double or triple your salary over the next 6 to 12 months, so that you can be prepared for what could be coming. So this is what I would recommend, and I really hope that you got a lot of value out of this video. So if you enjoyed the video, make sure you hit the like, subscribe, got videos coming out all the time, and let me know in the comments what you thought of this video. Was it useful? And my name is Douglas James, and I'll see you in the next video.